everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. This is a methodology breakdown of AMS-I.E, switch from non-renewable biomass of thermal applications by the user, version 13, and this is a CDM methodology. On our agenda today, we'll talk about Envision blockchain. We'll go over what the Guardian is and what problems we face and how we can solve them. A recap of our previous webinars. Some information about carbon credits and methodologies. We'll also go over our policy development checklist and some information about Cookstove methodologies. We'll also go into detail about the AMS-I.E schema and workflow, and lastly, do a demo of the policy comparison, as well as how you can use AMS-I.E within the Guardian. Envision Blockchain Solutions builds applications for the Web3 space, and we focus on guiding organizations through 3 major milestones on their Web3 journey: use case analysis, proof of concept development, scaled deployments, and we're also the builders and maintainers of the Guardian. Since 2020, the open source Guardian maintained by Envision Blockchain with support from HBAR Foundation and Swirls Labs has utilized the hedera public network to enable transparent, auditable, and traceable documentation of the emission process and life cycle of digital environmental tokens. In 2021, leveraging its expertise, Envision Blockchain introduced the Managed Guardian Service, also known as MGS, a SaaS solution tailored for the carbon market to simplify environmental application development, offering core Guardian features like the policy workflow engine and W3C libraries on a scalable platform. MGS launched in 2022, and it supports organizations in creating traceable environmental tokens on Hedera's ledger, advancing global sustainability efforts. So what problems do we face in the market today, and what do these solutions look like? To the left, we'll see a list of lack of auditability in sustainable finance, analog systems being used, friction in project audit and verification, lack of price transparency, sustainability reporting based on estimates. And we're looking to solve this by making climate finance auditable, digitizing open source methodologies, which we'll be talking about today, scale validation and verification, discover a global carbon price, and make sustainability reporting credible. Here you'll see a list of some of our previous webinars. We host these monthly, and you'll see that we have webinars that focus on Vera's methodologies, CDM. We also have some from Gold Standard. So if any of these stand out to you in the list, you can find them on our YouTube channel. Now, when it comes to understanding carbon credits and methodologies, it's important to know what is a carbon credit and what is a methodology. So a carbon credit represents a measurable reduction or removal of 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide or its equivalent from the atmosphere. It's awarded to projects that successfully reduce greenhouse gas emissions, providing a way to offset emissions and support environmental sustainability. Now, what is a methodology? A carbon credit methodology outlines the actions and calculations required to determine the emission reductions or removals associated with a project. It includes scientifically informed steps to estimate the impact on carbon emissions with over 400 methodologies available, varying in quality, complexity, and feasibility. So as we've worked through developing each one of these policies, we've done them for the webinars, and we also have more within our open source library that you can find on GitHub. We've come up with this checklist of all the steps that we take, and you can also take if you're looking to create your own policies using the Guardian. So the first stage here is research and preparation. Effective policy creation begins through research and preparation. Project developers or users must gain a comprehensive understanding of the environmental project by clearly defining its scope and documenting all activities involved. This foundational knowledge ensures that the policy creator is well informed. Then we have that second stage of methodology selection. So maybe you already know what type of project you want to work on. Maybe you're not a project developer, you're just looking to create policies and contribute. So here you can select that appropriate methodology. You want to make sure that it is targeting a certain environmental benefit. And policy creators can then review that methodology, make sure that it's relevant to the project type, aligns with all the project activities, location, data availability to those project developers or anyone interested in using that policy. Then the third stage here is workflow research. So you want to research the workflow to understand what each participant's role is. Policy creators must outline the steps for the project participants, the validation body, and the registry from the project conception to credit issuance. This ensures that there's an aligned timeline and clear responsibilities. Now, the fourth stage is going to be mapping out the quantification approach. So mapping the quantification approach involves selecting and applying the correct equations to calculate environmental benefits. Policy creators must identify the relevant formulas and data inputs used to measure impact accurately. And this just ensures precise calculations and reliable results. And that's really the beauty here of making these policies, is that once we've created it once, we know that anyone who's using that is going to be following those same calculations and expecting a certain result. Then the fifth stage is the Excel and digital schema creation. So you want to develop a spreadsheet incorporating the mapped questions and equations for environmental quantification. Policy creators can utilize our Excel template to facilitate this process, and you could find this on The Guardian. You could download it and start inputting your fields and data in there as well. Once it's been completed, you could go ahead and import it back to The Guardian, where it can be used to create those digital schemas for efficient data management. And the sixth step is going to be the policy workflow engine. The policy workflow engine in The Guardian allows users to create policies using coding blocks. These blocks should define every role, step, information flow, calculations, document creation, and minting rules, and that's just part of the list. There's a lot of information that's going to be collected within each one of those coding blocks in order to structure this policy. So now we could go into more specifics about Cookstove methodologies. So around 2.4 billion people use smoky biomass or kerosene stoves, causing 2 to 3 million premature deaths annually and contributing to 2% of global GHG emissions. Efficient cookstoves reduce emissions by using less fuel or cleaner fuels, improving combustion, and lowering fuel collection time and costs. Only a few stoves, such as LPG and electric models, significantly cut smoke and health impacts. And cookstoves are the leading project type in the voluntary carbon market. So accurate quantification of the climate benefits is essential for credible carbon credits, which therefore support emission reduction targets and carbon neutral products. In the voluntary market today, you'll see some methodologies like gold standards TPDDTEC, gold standards metered energy, their simplified methodology, CDM's AMS-II.G, AMS-I.E, which we'll be talking about today, and Vera's VMR 0006. There's also a few others in that list that are not pointed out here. Now, if you're familiar with the information that's collected for these projects, we know that there are these SDGs that are associated with the benefits that come with each project. So Sustainable Development Goals are a set of 17 global objectives established by the United Nations to address pressing environmental, social, and economic challenges. They aim to create a more equitable and sustainable world by 2030, focusing on issues such as poverty, inequality, climate action, and peace. Now, with these cookstove projects, we could see some SDGs related to them, like 13, which is climate action, 7, affordable and clean energy, 5, gender equality, and 3, good health and well-being. When we quantify these emission reductions, there are some key considerations or even terms that are used within the methodologies that we should be aware of. So with usage and adoption, households often use improved cookstoves for only part of their cooking, or they may not adopt them fully. So project developers must track this usage through surveys, performance tests, meters, sales data, etc. We also have some terms like stove stacking. So when households use both old and new stoves, this is known as stove stacking. Some methodologies estimate this directly via surveys, while others only credit the cooking done with the new stove. Then we also have rebound effect. Households may use more energy after getting an improved stove, known as rebound. Only kitchen performance tests directly measure this increase, so other methods do not account for rebound. And then we have emission factors. So methodologies convert the fuel consumption changes into GHG reductions using emission factors for each type of fuel. And it accounts for carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide emissions. And lastly, we have the fraction of non-renewable biomass, also known as FNRB. Credits are only given to CO2 reductions from the non-renewable biomass. So if there's any biomass that would decay naturally, it wouldn't be considered renewable, it would be considered renewable and therefore not credited in these projects. And I think it's important to talk about market expansion since the Cookstove projects are growing rapidly. So here we have Cookstove projects that are experiencing a significant expansion in the voluntary carbon market, and it's driven by that increased demand for cleaner cooking technologies. Many suppliers rely on carbon offsets to make efficient stoves more affordable using the generated credits to subsidize cost and accelerate adoption. This growth reflects a rising recognition of the benefits of improved cookstoves for both climate and health. And with the Guardian, we're here to enhance accuracy. So the Guardian supports precise measurement of climate benefits by enabling programmatic expressions of methodologies and detailed data comparison. This ensures that carbon credits accurately reflect emission reductions, helping companies meet their targets and market carbon neutral products. We're also here to build trust. So the Guardian enables updates to methodologies, which can help us address concerns raised by experts and media. By incorporating these improvements, it enhances the credibility of emission reduction claims and it helps maintain market trust and project sustainability. Now we're moving into our schemas and workflows. And when we talk about a schema, we're looking at all the information that's collected here for this project to have the correct quantification. So in this slide, we'll be looking at AMS-I.E schema. And this is using our Excel template that you can find on the Guardian. And we can look at this a little deeper here by going to the actual Excel. So you'll see that we have this template that we follow, and you can go ahead and download this if you're looking to create your own policy. You'll be able to fill out information like the schema name, maybe you want to give it a description, what type of schema it is, and then we have these columns for required field, field type, parameter, visibility, question, if we want to allow multiple answers and a sample answer. So what we're doing here is really collecting all the info that we're expecting the user to respond to. So I have some questions about their project details. We can follow what certain PDDs collect. So we have like the summary of project descriptions, sectoral scope, project type. We could collect location, project proponent or project participant information, crediting periods, any compliance with laws, sustainable development. So those are those SDGs we were talking about. And we can just continue adding to this list until we've collected all the information we need. Here in the specific one, this is everything we'll be gathering for the project details. Then we also have a sheet for additionality determination. So in this, we want to build in certain questions that ask the user what approach they want to take. So here we're asking them to select an option that will be used to demonstrate additionality. They can choose a positive list, tool 19, tool 21, and they'll be redirected to the correct flow for them. Then we have our main schema, which is going to be our emission reductions, and this is going to be our verifiable credential. You'll see that we've outlined that here. We're capturing information from the baseline emissions, project emissions, leakage emissions. Within the project emissions and leakage, we also have the possibility of using tools. So all of that's going to be captured in here, and you'll see that there's a lot of information. It has a lot of sub-schemas in it. And again, we're trying to capture all the options that a project developer could be offered within the methodology. So maybe they have a certain way to calculate the quantity of woody biomass. They have 4 options, and we want to offer those 4 options. And you'll see an example of that here, where you can calculate FNRB using tool 30 or tool 33, or you can use a default value, and we're going to go ahead and let the user select that there. And therefore, we built in this logic here of which one's going to apply to them. So therefore, when we have the policy, it's going to reflect the correct value for them. Okay, and going back now to our presentation, we can go ahead and look at the workflow. So when we talk about a workflow within the Guardian, you might be familiar with the policy workflow engine. And what we're trying to do here is make a map of who are the roles that we're going to have involved, what are the steps they need to take, what are some functionalities that we want to give them. And when we look at the policy workflow engine, this is going to be a lot of information collected and built in to make this policy. So here what you're looking at is a simplified overview of everything we want to capture in there. And you'll see that we have 3 different roles. So we have our project proponent or project participant, we have the registry, and the validation and verification body. So once those accounts have been approved, we have our project proponent moving into the next step, which would be to create their project design document. They can fill out information about their project. We do have some calculations occurring in there, and that would be submitted. The registry can then add this to the project pipeline. It could go under some review, and then it's added to the project registry. Then we have a step here where the project proponent can start their monitoring activities. They can fill out their monitoring report based off of the parameters that should be updated based off that methodology. And maybe they're using methodological tools that also need to be updated as well. So you can do that there, submit it. The VVB can approve or reject. If they approve it, then we have that final approval from the registry before the credits are issued. So here, this is just going to be an explanation of what it is that we're capturing in these Excels and therefore in the policy itself. So here we have our baseline emissions, quantification approach, and this is going to be an equation that directly comes out of the AMS-I.E methodology. So in order to calculate our baseline emissions for a specific year, we have different parameters that come into play. We have quantity of woody biomass that is substituted or displaced in that year, fraction of woody biomass that is used in the absence of the project activity, net calorific value for the non-renewable woody biomass, and baseline emission factors of fossil fuels projected to substitute non-renewable woody biomass. So here you'll see that we're multiplying all of those values, and then we should get our baseline emissions. And as I explained in the Excel, we are trying to make this policy in a way that's dynamic, and a user can go ahead and select the option that applies to them instead of having to make a policy that's only structured for one type of scenario. So here we have different options, A, B, C, and D, for how we can calculate parameter BY, which is the quantity of woody biomass that's substituted or displaced. And each one of those approaches has its own calculation and its own equation that's outlined in the methodology. So if I'm a user who has an electric cook stove and I can only use option D, then I'm going to go ahead and choose that option. And within the policy, you're going to be prompted to insert data only for that approach. And you should be getting the calculation based off of option D, which is going to be then used for your baseline emissions in that equation to the left. Now for the project emissions quantification, in this methodology, it specifies that if project cook stoves use biomass, the following sources of project emissions shall be considered. So if you are using project emissions, or if you are including project emissions from cultivation use and processing of biomass, you would want to calculate that using tool 16. And what we do is if you selected yes, that's something you need to include, then you'll be prompted to fill in data to tool 16. Now for tool 3, that would only be applied if you have project emissions due to the use of diesel. And then for methane emissions, the methodology outlines that you can calculate this using AMS-III.G, AMS-III.F, or AMS-III.H. So it depends on what the user is having methane emissions coming from. Maybe it's landfill, composting, wastewater treatment. And then within the policy, the methane emissions are included if the user selects yes. However, this value that is applied is based off of the value the user input. So we wouldn't be redirecting them to either any of those three methodologies, the way we do with the tools, but we would expect them to calculate this and provide the value. And for leakage emissions, so leakage emissions refer to the increase in greenhouse gas emissions outside of the project boundary as a result of project activities. And this can occur when the project causes a shift in activities, such as the use of non-renewable resources by non-project end users, leading to unintended emissions elsewhere. And similar to the project emissions, if there is any leakage emissions from cultivation, use, and processing of biomass, you would be redirected to Tool 16. And then it also specifies that leakage emissions related to the non-renewable woody biomass saved by the project activity are typically assessed through ex post surveys of users and the areas from which the woody biomass is sourced. So within this policy, we've tried to streamline the process and avoid the need for surveys. So we've opted for the default approach of applying a net to gross adjustment factor of 0.95 to account for leakages. And you can see this applied to the parameter BY. And lastly, here we have the emission reductions quantification. So what we're looking at is the value we got for the baseline. We want to subtract that from our project emissions and from any leakage emissions, and then we should get the emission reductions. Now within the Excel, we are trying to map out how any questions answered by the user can affect the flow of that policy, what calculations are coming into play, what parameters are used within each one of those equations. But once we've created this policy and it's fully digital, you'll be able to see these decision flows and schema trees within the UI. So here you'll see the baseline emissions and kind of the logic that goes behind that. So the user can have different calculations coming from tool 33, tool 30, maybe they add different types of fuel types. We have those different approaches for parameter BY. So you have the 4 of option A, B, C, or D. And depending on their selections, then they would be prompted to answer these other aspects of maybe they have different types of institutions that need to be added on for option C. So here you'll be able to see all of this within each schema tree, and you'll have one for baseline emissions, project emissions, leakage, the emission reductions, even additionality questionnaires will have these decision flows. Okay, so we're going to look at the policy comparison feature and how this works out for workflow comparison similarity scoring. So here you'll see that we have AMS-I.E already imported to the left, and we're trying to compare it to AMS-II.G and BMR 0006. So when we're looking at policy comparison, we're really looking at that flow that I was talking about, which is what actors are involved, what information is being sent in and out, what schemas are being used, what tokens are we creating, what tools are we using. All of that is captured in here, and you'll be able to compare that side by side. So you'll see that you have that detailed workflow comparison where you can compare components of policy workflows side by side, including the roles, actions, information exchange, project and document approvals, rejections, minting rules, calculations, and associated tokens. You'll also see that similarity scoring where you can evaluate how closely these policies align with a reference policy through a similarity score, which highlights variation and ensures consistency across different methodologies. And now, what are some of the benefits of having this policy comparison and standardization in general? So we can ensure accuracy and integrity by comparing the detailed structure of policies. The tool helps detect and prevent deviations or inaccuracies that could lead to fraud, ensuring that methodologies are applied correctly. We can also enhance transparency, so it promotes uniformity by helping policy creators develop new policies that align with standardized flows while still allowing for the collection of different information types as needed. And then, of course, we're looking to support standardization, so it provides clear visibility into policy structures and decision-making processes, fostering trust and credibility in the methodologies used for carbon credit calculations. So here we'll just see an example of how maybe a registry or validator can use this tool. So here I'm going to go ahead and import two versions of AMS-II.G. They shouldn't have any differences or be manipulated in any way. So you'll see that we do have that 99% similarity. And as we go through this, you'll see that almost everything is going to show up as green. Maybe we have some tools using a different message ID, and that can change it up a little bit there. But in general, if I were someone who maybe is looking to delete part of this policy or manipulate it in any way, it would be something that can easily reflect in here, as you'll see that all of those blocks are missing and red. And then for policy creators, maybe you're just looking to create a new policy. You really like how a certain registry conducts business and maybe the flow that they have. So you want to make sure that you have all those validation steps in there. You're collecting information at a certain point in time. You're minting at a certain point in time or issuing credits at a certain point in time. Then you can go ahead and use this tool to make sure that your policy is aligning with that one. And maybe you're just making minimal changes like changing the token name, or you don't need a certain tool like tool 19 and you can go ahead and remove that, but we'll see what those changes are in here. So now we're just going to go ahead and go to the Guardian, and we can play around with the comparison tool and show you how this looks, how you can use it. So I'm currently in the Policies tab, and we can go ahead and open the comparison feature by clicking on this Compare button. So you want to go ahead and select the one that you're going to use as reference. So I'm going to have AMS-I.E, and I'm going to click Add. And then I want to compare AMS-II.G, VMR, and these two gold standard policies. And then we can go ahead and click that compare button. So now here you'll be able to see which one is our reference policy. So you'll see that it's all white. We have the similarity scoring here at the very top, some information about the policy we're comparing, and you'll be able to see what each one of these colors means. So in green, we'll have that all those blocks are equal, they're the same. We have blocks that are equal, but maybe their child blocks are different. Blocks are of the same type, but are partially equal. And then red is that the blocks are absent in the other policy. So just looking at these first two, we know that AMS-I.E and AMS-II.G come from CDM. And they should be following the same type of workflow. So what we're going to see differences in is not in the flow and the users, it's going to be in the information that's collected. So here, if we scroll down, you'll see that we have a different schema being used than the one in AMS-I.E. You can also see that here for the reports. So this monitoring report should not be the same as the one in AMS-I.E, as they are collecting different types of information. We can also look at this mint token. So here we have the field that's being referenced in order to issue credits is going to be different from the one in AMS-I.E. But in general, we will still have that same token name. Now, if we go back to the top and we move over to VMR 0006, we'll see that we are getting a 52% similarity score here. And keeping in mind that this is going to follow a different workflow. This is Vera's workflow that we're trying to follow here. And so there are going to be differences between the one that we have for AMS-I.E versus the one for Vera. And we'll be seeing that there is just certain blocks that don't exist in here. Those are actions maybe taken by a certain role. If we open up this mint token again, you'll see that now it's not just the rule or the reference field that's different, but our token ID and our token name is going to be different as well. And then for these last two, these are following, I believe it's a gold standard workflow. And you'll see that there is just a lot of differences between the flow that is followed here versus the one in the CDM policy AMS-I.E. And if we scroll all the way down, we'll see that we have all these red blocks. So all of this is absent in the AMS-I.E policy. Now, if we were to compare two of these side by side, let's say two improved cookstove policies, and I just simply changed the name of the token, then they should have a almost identical structure, and maybe it'll be a 99% similarity score there. So again, this is dependent on how you're trying to use this tool. Maybe you're creating policies yourself and you want to use this as a guide to make sure that you're following the standardized workflows, or you're a registry who is, or a validator who is trying to make sure that nobody's manipulated a project that they're submitting or a policy that they're submitting, and you want to just make sure that it's showing up as almost identical. So now we could go ahead and click on the policies tab here, and we're going to do a quick walkthrough of AMS-I.E. So one of the first things we can go ahead and look at is our schemas. And this is going to be everything that was captured within that Excel. So as I've mentioned before, you can go ahead and generate an Excel template by clicking this button. We could go ahead and import that template. So I could have imported the Excel that I created right into here and made these digital schemas. So I'm going to filter to just show AMS-I.E. And here we'll see each one of the tabs that I had. So we have our project description, monitoring report. This is to collect information about the project participant, the BBB. We have our baseline emissions, project emissions, leakage, project details, emission reductions, additionality determination, and then we have each one of those different options that a user can select. So now I'm going back to that policies tab. This policy has already been set to dry run, so we're just going to be testing it today. We're not actually minting or issuing any credits, but we will see what the calculations come out to and what it would look like if we did issue credits. Now I'm going to go ahead and create some users, so we can click this twice here. I want a user for the project participant and one for the BBB. So you'll see that we have these two here that we can select. I'm going to select user 1. Assign it to the project participant. And now we're going to go ahead and give them a name. So here we're just going to put this name. It's for demo purposes. We could call them green services and select create. Okay, then we're going to go to user 2, where we're going to assign this to the BBB. We're going to give the BBB a name. And then following that workflow that we showed in the presentation, we're going to go ahead and go back to the registry where they're going to approve these users. So they're going to approve the project participant and then approve the BBB. Let's select approve here. Okay, now I'm going back to user 1, which is our project participant, and I'm just going to select the next button here to go to the projects tab, where we can now start filling out this information. So here we are going to click on this test button. This is only available if you are on dry run mode, and all the answers that are filled in using this test button can be edited in the schemas tab. You can also use the sample answers if you're using our Excel template. So whatever you've put in there, once you've imported that, it should have that test data available. And then I'm going to make some smaller changes here. I just want to make sure that my location is showing up correct. Let's update this. And you can see that here. And I'm going to update these dates. Okay. Then you'll see that we have our additionality determination, our baseline emissions. This has already been pre-filled with some test data, and the data that we are using today is coming from a VCS project that we've sourced from the VAER registry. So here you'll see all the data that they have in their Excel for their emission reductions calculation. And what we're looking to get today is this value here, 54,167. So you'll see that we've selected option A for parameter BY for our project emissions. This sample project does not have any of these activities. So we're going to select no. You'll also see that we have this help text in here just to let you know that we did already apply an adjustment factor of 0.95 to account for leakages and eliminating the need for surveys. And then we can go ahead and select create. So here we'll see once that's finished loading that we have our status. It says waiting for validation. We're going to go back to that admin account. Select next. And we want to go to the projects tab here where the registry can now look through this information that was submitted and select validate. So we're back at the project participants account, and you'll see that we have this add report button. So we're going to go ahead and leave all the fields as is and select create so we can see if we are minting or issuing the correct amount of credits. And now we're going back to that, or we're going to go back to the project participant. We have to go to the monitoring report tab. So we just submitted the monitoring report. We're going to go ahead and select next to go to the monitoring reports tab. And here we'll see this assign where we have this drop down. So any VBBs that have been approved should show up here. And we're going to select this one that we've already approved. And now that VBB should have access to the monitoring report that was submitted. So I'm going to hit next here. They can go ahead and view that document and open it up, see all the information. And not only are they going to see the information that, we can open that again, that was input by the user, but they should be getting these calculation results as well. So you'll see that there are certain values that were not input by the user. Like I know the 64.4 is coming from a default value of them selecting default value. They selected this region of South Asia, and therefore they have this default value for the emission factor. So all of these things are just going to show up in here already calculated and ready to be verified. And we want to go ahead and select verify there. And now for the final step here is going back to that admin. They can go ahead and go to the monitoring reports and see what the VDB just approved. So it's going to be that same exact document. They can view it themselves too and select approve. And now we'll see this notification that we started minting those tokens. We can click next to go to our VPs tab. And we're going to see that value here. So I'll show the Excel we had from the VCS project, which this was again sourced from the Vera registry. And based off of all of the data collected here, this project should have 54,167 right here. Estimated net GHG emission reductions and removals. And what we're seeing here is 54,167. So we can go ahead and view the trust chain. So here we're seeing the verifiable presentation with some token information, the recipient's name, token amount. So what you're seeing is not the total amount, just because it is still minting. Once that's completed, then we'll start seeing that token transfer. You also have the mint date, policy name, the description for it. We know that we were in a dry run setting, so we are testing this without actually issuing any credits. We have the issuer's name, and at the very bottom here, you're going to see every step that we've taken that is displayed in each one of these cards here. So you'll see that the policy was created, who created it, the VC file for that. You'll see that the project was created, the automatic completion of those project fields, project validation, monitoring report created. So again, it's every single step that we've taken by these different actors, and we can see each one of these represented as a VC file as well. So here we see that the project was created. And we have all the data that was insert. Now in this VC, we would be able to see all the calculations that occurred. Again, the monitoring report created, And we would also be able to see all the automatic completion of those fields, which was the same one that we were able to see with the BBB and with the registry before they go ahead and approve those credits to be issued. And then lastly, we have that we've issued these credits. You can also open that up and see the amount in there, the token ID, the date. Now, if you're interested in submitting and being part of the community, you can find us on GitHub. This is going to be the GitHub for Hashgraph Guardian. We also have a Discord, and again, this is going to be Hedera Discord. You could find us through the sustainability channel and send any policy requests, enhancements, or report a bug on there. Or you could also do this directly to Envision, so you could submit that policy request, enhancement, or bug. You can email us at support@guardianservice.io or find us at our website, guardianservice.io. Thank you, and hope to see you all here next month.